Previously on Drone Wars.
Right? We prioritized, let's get something in the field. Let's not go in our in our hole for 2 years and go like build something and then show up with it. Like, let's get something fielded quickly. So, and I think that there's a lot of, people wanting to work on national security. I mean, I think you've seen, especially kind of post-Ukraine, right? People understanding that, we are not at the end of history. And so reliability, signature management, efficiency in a contestless environment, that was the problem we saw. And that was a SOCOM problem when we were fielding it in 2021. What's pretty clear, right, since the invasion of Ukraine, is that's going to be an everyone problem. I'm Adam Warmoth, founder and CEO of Chariot Defense, and you're watching the Drone Wars podcast.
So let's talk about what's going to quickly become an Anduril Mafia here, right?
Yeah.
It is amazing to see how many people are spinning out of that ecosystem, much like we saw at SpaceX and Tesla, right? How supportive has that network been for you in this journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's been incredible. I credit the Anduril leadership in terms of the amount of mentorship they give you when you're there, and not just putting you in your pigeonhole and having you execute, but giving you the broader context, right? And so, again, this is the idea of having that growth and engineering working together. And I think that's why you're going to see great founders coming out of Anduril. It's a similar thing with Palantir, the forward deployed model, right? The fact that we don't have these hard, strict lines between go-to-market and BD and engineering. And so I think you've got a great kind of set of people who understand both sides of that and the importance of it. So I think you're going to see a great outgrowth of talent. There's already been a bunch of companies, it's been great for us, kind of being able to work with those companies, work with Anduril directly, and in our relationships that we still have there. We have folks who are tipping us off to, hey, there's this opportunity over here. Yeah. We just got a contract vehicle through this group that wants to go fund innovative companies, and they'll go ahead and make that intro to us. We're already getting opportunities like that. So it's been a great network of founders. And again, credit to the Anduril leadership team for really, kind of teaching people how to succeed in that environment. And I think the same way why you see a Palantir Mafia as well.
Yeah. Did Palmer put a check in?
Palmer did not directly, but Matt Graham and Matt Steckman.
Awesome. Let's just talk about defense tech in general here for a minute. Is there a bubble?
Yeah. So I think kind of coming back to, the kind of this like requirements risk, right? .mil-PF risk, right? I think that, understanding how your product is not only going to solve a need, but is going to transition to a program. I think that there is a little bit of a gap where there's companies being funded without that identification, right? And I think that, again, kind of thinking about the differences of B2C versus selling to the government it is not if you build it, they will come, right? It is not the best product always wins, right? There are realities around programming and funding and program lines and FedEps, right? And like those things matter in the thesis of a company. And I think you're seeing some venture capitalists start to ask those questions in those pitch meetings.
Yep.
But there's some of the kind of newer investors of the space who don't necessarily know those questions to ask. And so you're seeing some funding for interesting products, but that haven't gone through the thought of, okay, which program office is this going to work with? Who's going to write the requirement for this, right? When is that getting funded in future year budgets? What is the offset here, right? What budget is going to come from to fund this? Is that something that has massive political support, right, on Congress who's going to defend that program, right? Those questions should be asked in the diligence phase, and I don't think are being asked in every case. So I think there is a little bit of a bubble, and I think that there will be companies who planned all that stuff out and execute against that plan who are successful, and there'll be companies who don't do that, who are not. And I hope kind of as we see kind of this, the bubble pop, right, or kind of your trough of disillusionment, right? What we are, spending a lot of time doing is trying to educate and say, hey, this is the difference, right? And so, hopefully, what we don't see is if there is one failure, right, or multiple failures of those companies that don't do that program planning, don't do the requirement shaping, that there's a way to tell the story of companies like Firestorm and companies like Chariot that are doing this the right way, right, and are going to have a different outcome.
I mean, it's what you just said is like what actually terrifies me, right? One of these defense unicorns BKs this year.
Yeah.
Does it just set all the funding on fire for everybody else? We preemptively raised, I'll say at a very reasonable valuation given where stuff is today, got it done before the election because we didn't know what that outcome was going to be. And then we're just thinking though, like, how do you always have like at least 18 months of cash on hand? Because I think this is a real risk. You know what I mean? There's companies that don't even have a product raising at 100 post. You know what I mean? Which is crazy.
Yep.
How many VCs do you think are going to be kind of sad panded here in the next couple of years? You know, do you think they stick with it because they see defense as like actually having a pathway to have the returns that they need, right? Which is, again, you need one company to return a fund. That's how they're all built. Or does this kind of morph into something maybe a little bit more VC and private equity-ish? You know what I mean? Where maybe private equity comes down the cap table because they're a little more experienced in this field. Where do you think it goes?
Yeah, I think you will see some interesting funding structures, right? I think you'll potentially see, there's, as you start kind of thinking about the M&A market for these companies, right? I think, and you think about kind of the existing primes and how they can innovate, right? And the cultures at those companies and the fact that it might be easier to go work with and bring in kind of a startup. So I think you're going to see some interesting funding structures. I think government revenue is differently shaped, right? Than, again, if we kind of compare the B2C and B2B worlds, the government, once you win that program of record, right? That's something that's, more easy to underwrite, right? And something that maybe PE can get behind, right? And say, okay, cool. I see a clear, ability to kind of, underwrite that revenue, underwrite that opportunity into the future. And so, yeah, I think you might start to see some blended structures. You might start to see companies have maybe multiple divisions, right, that are being kind of funded through different mechanisms, right? So the more mature business lines, right? So at Anduril, right, they've got some of these mature business lines, counter-intrusion, counter-UAS, and they've got some of the more speculative business lines, right? Maybe you might start to see kind of some different structures to say, hey, we're going to underwrite the PE investment, with this revenue over here in these programs, but we're just telling a story to venture capitalists around the growth opportunities and more speculative opportunities. So, yeah, I think certainly you'll start to see a little bit more blended in terms of the round constructions. It's
kind of crazy that prime, $40 to $60 billion prime hasn't just come in and gobbled all these small companies up.
Yeah.
I mean, I just see such an existential threat to these guys. I mean, until acquisition reform changes, and I am incredibly skeptical, you play by the rules that exist today, but with so many, with big amounts of capital coming into these startups now, theoretically, you could have companies that do take the 4 to 5 years to kind of find the right product market fit and then find that transition partner. And now you have real problems if you're a prime, because like they could come and take massive amounts of market share away from you.
Yeah.
Why do you think the primes aren't coming in and buying everything up right?
Yeah. I think that there's I think you're maybe going to start to see a change, right? But until CCA, right? A startup hadn't won head to head against the primes yet, right? If you think about Anduril's kind of first 2 programs record, counter-intrusion, right? Boeing had already tried SBInet, a smart border in the 90s, and failed. So the primes weren't really going after the border stuff then. On the counter-US program record, right? The Army had already awarded FS LIDS in 2017, which is the year Anduril was founded, right? So it didn't even have a chance to compete. And so I think, some of the primes saw, okay, cool. Hey, the big Army thing's already done. And so the SOCOM thing over here, that's going to be small, right? And so you didn't see the primes kind of directly competing there in a way that you then saw it on CCA, right? And so I think CCA was a wake-up call. What that hasn't turned into yet, right, is that was just a down select. There's still at that next phase an opportunity for other companies to come back in, right? And so
we've heard a couple folks are chomping at the bit with some pretty cool product.
Yeah. And so you could argue that like even that's not really been proven out yet, right? That was an easier decision for the Air Force to make because it wasn't that final decision. And it was actually probably the right decision for them to make because, that's actually going to, selecting those companies is going to lead to them having a more competitive pool to choose from.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're kind of, working with those smaller companies who don't have necessarily the resources to make those big investments themselves. So I think that was the right call by the Air Force, obviously not knowing any of the details of the programs or the bids. But even that is still kind of yet to be proven, right? Is one of those smalls going to actually win this big program? It might take that to like actually bring the primes in to kind of come do this M&A kind of type activity. Right there, the multiples is just such a different world from what they're used to. And we kind of talk about the PE versus VC, right? The margin profiles, right, look a lot different, right? You're spending a lot more in OpEx, but with the goal of a lot bigger gross margin. That's something that, right, kind of after that, the Last Supper, right, has really been a focus of, minimize, capping that profit, right? These cost plus contracts. So the idea of we're going to go invest our own capital, right? We're going to spend a lot on OpEx. We're going to spend a lot on building out some core IP technology, but that's going to allow us to capture more on the backside. I think you also need some signal from the government that they understand and accept that business model, because you still have a lot of folks in government who want to pay the marginal cost of delivery, and this is why it's so hard to sell software. This is like Anduril's whole thing. Hey, we're going to sell software, but we're going to put it in a box because the government likes to buy boxes.
To buy boxes.
And the marginal cost of delivery of software is nearly free, right? And so companies will go develop their own IP, their own software, but then, when you're trying to do your price justification, right? That's a really hard thing to do with software when they're saying, hey, whatever that DVD costs or that drive, right, that you're delivering this software on, well, that's what we should be paying, right? Well, how many people are working on my contract, right? Because that's what I'm going to pay. So I think you need, and you've seen some stuff coming out of SecDef around pushing towards these software acquisition pathways. So I think you'll need to see a big win, right, of a startup against an incumbent.
Yep.
And you'll need to see the government saying, hey, yes, we understand and we accept these business models where there is higher gross margin based on the company's own IRAD they've put up front. I think you need to see like both of those two things happen before you start to see some major M&A activity.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global headquarters in San Diego, California. Each episode is filmed inside our X-Cell, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from unmanned industry leaders. Listen as they share the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and the bold predictions about what the next 5 to 10 years in unmanned systems and advanced manufacturing have in store for us. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show. What do you want your company to become?
I want to be the power prime. Yeah. I think that there's a massive opportunity here to build the infrastructure layer that lets other companies go build on top of, right? Companies that are doing things like directed energy. We worked with Aurelius, right? Doing high energy lasers at Jiffix as well at that exercise, right? Companies doing EW capabilities, right? Companies that today are limited in their ambitions because they don't have enough power, right? There's certain capabilities that we can't field and that we could develop, but that we just don't have the power for, and so they don't get developed.
Sure.
Think about like an electronic final protective fires on every kind of squad level vehicle. Not possible today because of the lack of the power infrastructure. And so, we want to be that horizontal layer. We want to be able to pull in those high voltage, battery expert, those, power electronics engineers to build we want to be the electron broker, right? For all these new capabilities.
That is so easy to explain. That is a really, really great way to tell everyone what you're doing. How big can this be? I mean, if you want to be the power prime, it'd be a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yep. Yeah. And, we're making sure, you kind of talk about the valuations, right? We're making sure we're on a glide path. We're trying to be responsible on managing our capital, managing our valuation, right? Putting constraints on ourselves that help us focus.
Yep.
We think constraints are good. If you get too unconstrained too early, it's actually can be a bad thing for the company. So we're being very intentional about that. But yeah, we certainly believe this could be, this could be something that goes the whole way.
Great. What do you wish you knew when you started the company that you know today?
One of the things that we have discovered, which is kind of a major tailwind for us, is the opportunity on the software side. And we're starting to invest more and more there now. But kind of knowing this 6 months ago, would have immediately started investing. And that's on the power management component, right?
Bingo.
And as you start to think about, again, kind of coming back to talking about power as a dependent variable, right? Power has always kind of been the afterthought. But as you start thinking about kind of advanced missions where you need autonomous systems kind of delivering capability on these extended duration missions, if you don't account for power and you treat power as this kind of on or off switch, you're going to cut the duration of that mission by 50%, right? If you're able to think about kind of mission aware power management, where you're considering, is there an overhead ISR asset that's going to pick up my thermal signature? Don't turn that generator on, right? If there's an inbound one-way attack missile, hey, pull power away from all your non-critical loads and put it into your countermeasures. If you have a system that's out going to, loiter and collect information, and maybe it's got, maybe it's a loitering munition, it needs to decide, am I going to loiter for another hour and I'm not going to be able to make it back to base now? But the value of that extended mission duration is worth the cost of losing that, of attriting that platform. Mm-hmm. So like an economic, right, as we start talking about the economic war, right? And these thinking about these attritable and these calculations of what is the value of that thing that I'm taking out from an economic perspective, from a mission perspective, what is that value to me? All of that stuff needs to be considered as we move from kind of a constrained autonomy of like path planning to system level optimization. Yeah. Yep. So that's probably the biggest thing that where our vision's evolved based on what we've seen and based on what we've learned.
Seems like a spin out. So if people want to reach out to you or follow up or learn more, where can they find you on the internet?
So you can reach out to me directly, adam@chariotdefense.com. We will, by the time this podcast airs, have our website and our Twitter handle up at Chariot Defense and chariotdefense.com. We're going to be hiring, so my background's in mechatronics. I want people with cross-disciplinary engineering skill sets who can blend across electrical, mechanical, software, because that's what we're delivering is integrated systems. Yep. We want to work with veterans who have direct experience in this warfighting concepts, who'd lived these pain points and want to go solve it for their friends who are still in. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in working with us, if you have an application where power is your limiting factor and you need to be able to deliver this, you need to be able to sell this to the government by saying, again, how does this actually fit into your .mil PF? Yep. How you power that system is critical. So we want to be partnering with you as well if you're developing those capabilities. So reach out and we'll have a conversation about operational energy.
Awesome, man. Thanks for the time today.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.